On this episode of Unsuitable, we are going to analyze the foreign language of business, which is particularly relevant as there continues to be a lot of technical speak occurring in the areas of tax and accounting, and there is no shortage of business owners who are trying to make sense of this current economic environment in an effort to sustain and manage their businesses. Today's guest is going to help us out. Peter Margaritis, also known as the Accidental Accountant, is the author of Improv Is No Joke and Taking the Numb Out of Numbers, host of the Change Your Mindset podcast and the Change Your Mindset speaking demonstration on C-Suite Radio, which I love, and author of a ton of other great content at petermargaritis.com. Today, he's going to explain how those of us who are used to communicating in tech speak can be more effective to our clients and others we are trying to reach. Welcome to Unsuitable, Peter.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
Good. I'm so glad you could join us today remotely, and appreciate you doing so. I always prefer, obviously, to be in the room with a guest, but we'll make do. And I'm sure you're a veteran, so you certainly understand that as well, right?
Exactly.
So this topic is near and dear to my heart because I've had sort of a roundabout career myself, having spent time not only in public accounting but in corporate banking, and as a private industry CFO. And it's always, I know, frustrated me to no end that when you get in front of quote unquote experts, you hear a lot of acronyms and business speak and tech speak. So talk to me a little bit about how you got passionate about this topic and where you started.
Well, I didn't get into the accounting profession until I was 30 years old.
Okay.
I went to the university. I'm Greek, Greek American, and I really should be in a restaurant. And I was for a good portion of from 12 years old through college and even after college. And then I became a corporate banker in the Florida marketplace. And then I migrated up to Case Western, earned my master's of accountancy, and then started my public accounting with PW at that time.
Okay.
And I I learned the language of accounting, and it is a foreign language because, Doug, did you learn accounting, the language of accounting, in an 8-hour seminar?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
We had to invest a lot of time into understand that language.
Right.
But I was seeing this when trying to communicate, because I used to be that guy with a client, and they're looking at me like, oh,
Right.
and it wasn't until uh, my girlfriend at the time, fiance, I come, we get together. She's like, "How was your day?" And I would tell her. She goes, "Quit talking Chinese to me. I have no idea what you said." And I
Yeah.
just kind of laughed at her. And then, when somebody says it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, like, you know what? I do speak a foreign language.
Right.
So I have to become a better translator of that language, because the information that we're trying to share with our clients, and clients being external clients as well as our internal clients,
Yeah.
we want them to act on it.
Absolutely.
And too many of our clients are going, "Oh, I don't. Please, I'd rather watch grass grow. You're providing this data
Yep.
information, but there's no story there."
Right.
And we need to create a story, because I think you would agree with us. Numbers by themselves don't move on their own.
Right. Absolutely.
People make the numbers move. So when something increases or decreases by a percentage that catches us off guard, find the story. Don't just repeat, well, we fell by 35% and our gross margins have deteriorated and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Why did they
Exactly.
move?
Yeah, I think that's certainly sage advice, and for me, it sort of clicked as I started spending more and more time in front of clients, and for me particularly, being part of the construction segment. The thing I love about contractors in general, they're always fairly transparent and straightforward. So I vividly remember this back in the day, going out and probably talking in circles around the topic that needed addressed. And, finally he stopped me and he said, "What in the hell are you trying to tell me?" And you realize you're using all this, all this kind of corporate accounting speak or corporate finance speak, and not getting to the point that they can understand. So you're sort of like the Google Translate for accountants. Is that it?
Thank you. I'm gonna use that moving forward. I like that. I try to be, and I used to be that guy, but so I'll give you an example. I was doing an ANA update for the Arizona Society of CPAs back in 2014. And at the time, consolidations of VIEs was going through another iteration, another 1,000 pages or whatever. And the meeting planner wanted me to address it. Night before, I'm looking at my presentation, look at my slides, go, oh my God, there's just words. There's nothing else there. So
Right.
I, I said, think about it. What are they really trying to do? What? Well, they're trying to take something from over here and put it over here, but over here doesn't want it. They're trying to they're trying to move something. So I came up with this idea.
Right.
So when I put the title slide up, Consolidation of VAs, I saw everybody in the audience do what I expected. Reach for their phones and begin to do the conference prayer.
I love that. Yes.
So I said, wait, I've been here a couple times. Let me just do just some quick questions for the audience. I said, play with me here. I said, there was about 200 CPAs in the audience. I said, how many of you are married? Raise your hands. They all raised their hands.
Yeah.
How many of you have a mother-in-law? And their hands stayed up. I said, I want you to think of your mother-in-law as a variable interest entity, and your spouse wants their mother to move into your house. Let me rephrase that. Your spouse wants their mother to consolidate onto your balance sheet, and that's the last thing you want to do.
Right.
And by the way, your mother has 6 children, and you would rather them, we'll call them agents, you would rather your mother spend 2 months out of the year with each one of them so no one has control and we don't have to consolidate.
There you go. Easy way to think about it, right?
Easy way to think it. And it went from the conference prayer to leaning forward to laughter going. And for those who were in the audience, I know I have a really cool last name, but when people have met me over the years that I was that, yeah, you're the mother-in-law guy.
I
I
love it.
I won. That's the best compliment I could get. And
Uh,
it's how do we take the complexity and bake it down into something that's relatable to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because if you don't communicate clearly when you're doing that, like you said, then the execution falls apart. So, so oftentimes you get in the room with certain folks, and they always want to sound like the smartest person in the room,
Mhm.
and then instead they make it so nobody can relate to them. So,
Right.
you know,
Right. Exactly.
that's no good for anybody. Um, Talk to me about some of the biggest challenges you have or that you see with accountants as a whole in terms of trying to bridge that gap, because so many of us are thought to think very technically, and not really work on those communication skills. So what's the biggest hurdle you see with CPAs?
With CPAs, and I see a lot with anybody trying to deal with clients, is it's about me, not about
Mhm.
them. And that my mindset should change to be it's about my audience and not so much about me. I don't have time to put this presentation together. No, no, that's about you. That's not about the
Right.
audience. And when I do a workshop on this, I'll ask the audience, have you ever taken an 8-hour CPE class that you were just bored to death with? That you didn't get anything done and you got your hours, but you walked out with nothing between your ears new. You remember how you felt? Remember that the next time you do a presentation and put yourself back in that chair and make that person excited to be in that chair.
Yeah.
And talking about the audience, you said construction. So I speak accounting. I speak general accounting. I don't speak very much construction accounting. And I did a 4-hour pre-conference workshop for the Construction Finance Management Association last year at their annual
Yeah.
convention.
Yep.
And I spent probably 18 hours with one of the instructional designers learning construction accounting lingo, so I could relate to the audience. But if I would have just come in with my general accounting knowledge and didn't put it into the context that they would understand, they're walking out with still nothing.
Right.
So always think about your audience first. Always think about, one, do they understand the language of accounting?
Yeah,
Two,
absolutely.
if they do, are they specialized in some aspect in accounting? And if they don't, then how can you, well, in all cases, how can you boil it down to something simple? But when you're working with those folks like in sales and HR, you really have to drop the accounting speak, because
Absolutely.
that's you become an anesthesiologist at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
At least you don't scribble on the page, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So you, like me, spent some time in corporate banking as well. So what did you notice about the difference, say, in banking or finance versus accountants, and how they try to communicate? Did you notice a lot of the same issues, or were they different?
They were different back in the day in Florida in the mid 80s. The loan officer was required to do to send information to the credit analyst and then analyze it together and then go out and work with the customer. But the loan officer is more of a salesperson,
Gotcha.
and but they could understand and be able to present and communicate with their customers. That's where I see the big difference, because they had the mindset of, they're in sales, they're trying to drive business.
Hmm.
And then I thought, well, you know what? Aren't we all in sales?
Right.
And it's not a bad word. It's actually, the more that we accept the fact that the way we communicate, the way we make people feel is part of sales, and the more that we can communicate effectively to that audience, to that client, or to that prospect, the likelihood that we'll be able to bring them in to the firm and become a client, versus if your client or your prospect is confused, uh, they're out looking for another accounting firm.
Right. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a great point. My mentor long ago taught me this right away. He said, "Doug, keep in mind you're in sales every day." And I said, "What do you mean? I don't have revenue goals, or I was just starting out." And he said, "Look, you're either selling internally, or you're selling externally, or you're promoting your company or your firm's brand by how you present yourself and who you are. So that is all selling." And that kind of really clicked for me, and but again, it goes back to the communication. If you can't communicate it well, then somebody's going to look at you like you have three heads.
Right. Right. And to that point of, you're asking how can CPAs become better communicators, is one, think outside of 40 hours and invest into yourself to become a better communicator. I look at 40 hours and public accounting practices. That's an area to work on your technical knowledge. Some also within the leadership skills, the people skills, but learning doesn't stop at 40. You kind of continue to invest, especially if it's something brand new that you're trying to get better, become better at, because you know that you're going to fail, you're going to hit walls, but you got to keep getting past it until you get to proficiency, just as we did learning the art of accounting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So different. And it goes, it can change on a dime too. I mean, look at us today. Here we are remote, right? So
Right.
we have Zoom meetings. Everybody's doing this during the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. So that image it can be very different. All of a sudden we're seeing each other's home offices and all this personal space. So that becomes a part of it too, right? How do you sort of navigate all of these things if you're a typical CPA or something like that?
I'm working right now with an accountant, a client here locally, and we were talking about this, and I said, he goes, we started, goes, I'm working, trying to get used to this. My dog might bark, my kids might come into the room, and
Right.
I went, that's fine. We're all been thrust into this, and it's not our offices. We have other things, and also our family members. I got two new FTEs upstairs, a 19-year-old son and my wife. Need to put my 19-year-old son on warning or performance review. And every time I delegate something to my wife, she's got this other business she's trying to work on and taking up my internet speed.
Right.
But that's the world that we live in right now.
Yeah.
So don't, yeah, if you get ready to go into a meeting, you might just say, my dog might bark, somebody might walk in, just ignore it. And I'm trying to keep it as quiet as possible. But right now it's a little. tough and just kind of accept that will happen and just move forward.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's how you react to those things, right? Rather
Right.
than the fact that they occur. It's again how you sort of present yourself and react to those things. So talk to me a little bit about the books you've written and what got you passionate about communicating in that way.
Well, I've had that question asked to me before. Like I said, I'm Greek American, so I come from a very gregarious background, family. You know, if the only way to get me to stop talking is to sit on my hands. And my first day at Price Waterhouse, I walked into their office and somebody took all the air out. And so there's when they're selling their recruits on what the firm is and then what the firm is, and it was like, what happened here? And
Yeah,
I just became passionate about, wait a minute, we're doing it. I had to learn public accounting, dealing with clients, and the technical side of it, which that's why I'm the accidental accountant.
I like the
Technical,
sign. Yes, I see that.
being my boss at a Fortune 500 company basically told me, how in the heck did you ever become a CPA? Because a CPA can get down to this detail. I can get you this far. You're an accidental accountant. And I wear that with honor because I also said, when you want something done in this building, who do you ask to get it done? Because I realized building relationship, boy, I realized that we have a stereotype.
Sure.
Whether we want to believe it or not, but the people outside believe it. There's a stereotype.
Absolutely.
And you
Yep.
said you were CFO or CF no?
A little of
A
both,
little bit, a
actually.
bit of both. And when the accountant within an organization shows up to sales, to HR, to IT, the person there naturally is defensive, especially if
Mm,
they don't know you. And you're looking for information, they might not be forthcoming with it. What I realized early on is if I could build relationships within the silos of an organization and they see me as, oh, hey, here comes Pete, versus, isn't that accountant guy from finance coming in here asking questions again?
right.
Build that relationship and they will give you information.
Yep.
You become trustworthy, but you have to extend and start meeting people and accepting who they are and have them understand you. Uh, then you can get all the information in the world. So that is what really drove the passion, and I've kept that passion and fire going on for quite a long time.
Yeah, and that's quite evident. You can see it in the way you talk about the topic and the industry, and I think that's fantastic to maintain that. So, what do you see as we all kind of sort of wonder what the new normal is going to look like here, right? Post crisis, more
Right.
is that going to be more telecommuting? Probably, certainly other things that will be involved. How do you how do you sort of pivot to adapting these ways to communicate and bridge that gap if you've got to do so remotely? In other words, I've always found it easier, obviously, to be sitting across the table or out somewhere with somebody, but boy, this Zoom thing and the remote conference calls and that's more challenging.
It is much more challenging, but you're a lot more comfortable today than you were 2 weeks ago.
True.
I do 90% of my podcast through Zoom, so I've gotten pretty proficient with Zoom.
Okay.
And I've helped other people become more proficient in it, and we have to become more proficient with the technology. Prior to this pandemic, the big disruptor was technology.
Mm,
Artificial intelligence will crunch the numbers for us and provide us here. Here's your high risk areas. Go look at those. Here is your medium and low risk versus having to go into the bowels of and pulling out files and stuff. Even at that point, we need to become better communicators because we're more of a consulting role
yes.
versus a bean counting stereotypical role of the accountant.
Right.
And I've said, if you want to differentiate yourself from everybody else, from all the other firms, invest time to become better communicators. And
Absolutely
and
true.
now invest time to become technologically sound in a remote world with the technology we have. And if you have a modem that has only 35 megabytes per second, you've got to upgrade.
Right.
You get, because I don't I see that this is going to continue, when we do get to the wherever when that other side actually is, when we're back to somewhat normalcy,
Right.
we'll a lot of people get accustomed to remote working,
Yeah.
and they might actually be even more productive than we ever imagined before.
Right. Right. But you still have to be able to, and I can see it with you, as we talked about, that passion comes across, that ability to listen and connect with your audience, that comes across even on a Zoom call. And I'm sure it would on a conference call too. So I think it's, again, you brought up a great point earlier, be mindful of your audience. Always think of your audience first. That's a great point.
And everybody in this world should take an improv workshop, because if everybody in this world took an improv workshop, it would be a much nicer world. Because in improv, it teaches us to listen, to be present in the moment. Uh, when this all occurred, I put in my email signature line: improvise the scene that you are in, not the one you want to be in.
That's great advice. I love that.
And that helps in this disruptive world even more so now, is just focus on the present. Just
Yeah.
be focused, and how can I be the best during this period of time? Tomorrow's a whole new day. Don't get too far ahead of yourself.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. So, one last question I've
Sure.
got to ask you, since you're a veteran podcast host yourself, what's the favorite podcast moment that you've had with any of your guests? Anything come to mind?
Oh, I interviewed a gentleman. His name is Dave Caperton, and Dave is a professional speaker, uh, former English teacher. Does I used to do stand up. Used to be on Sunday 95. Just a very very funny guy. And I interviewed him on his book, something about joy. And his is one of the few podcasts I go back and listen to almost regularly, because he had such good content. He made me laugh and felt so good, and that is probably, I rank him as my number one guest, and I've got, like, I think I've done 155 episodes to date.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome. And I agree with you. The ones that I are most memorable are the ones that I think back and, the conversation just flowed and it doesn't seem like work. You're just getting to know the person and having some fun and learning a little bit at the same time, right?
Right, and the second one I can think of is, he's a friend of your firm. You may know the guy, some guy named Jerry Esselstein.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yes, I interviewed Jerry at his house. He was in a recliner, I was in a recliner, and we're just sitting there having this conversation, and it was a ton of fun.
that's awesome. I know his brother Rick as well. Rick's a great guy also. So runs in the family.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, Peter, good luck with everything, and I appreciate you being on. Good luck with the other FTs in your house as well. I
Yeah.
I feel the I feel the pain there. I've got some adult children that are now home that I didn't expect to be home right now, so dealing with those FTs myself. But and I love the new moniker that we have for you. You're the Google Translate for CPAs.
Yes,
So
I'm the Google Translate for
I
CPAs.
love that.
Cool.
Well, thanks again for being on. And if you want more business tips and insight or to hear previous episodes of Unsuitable, visit our podcast page at www.raycpa.com/podcast. And while you're there, sign up for exclusive content and show notes. Thanks for listening to this week's show. Be sure to subscribe to Unsuitable on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us right now, including YouTube. I'm Doug Hauser. Join us next week for another unsuitable interview from an industry professional.